Do you know what is really frustrating? Watching good players flail around. People that have solid fundamentals, superb reads, and stellar spacing, yet they have one flaw. They fumble in their inventories. Fair warning where fair warning is due. This video is going to be a little more technical than my usual content. It is not about flashy stuff or montage-worthy super clips. If that is not your cup of tea, no worries in dipping out now. I hope to see you again in the next one. That being said, for those of you who are still watching, let us talk a little bit about inventories and why you, yes you in particular, should be putting more thought into how you organize yours. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of inventory management, let us get the basics out of the way so everyone is on an even playing field. First and foremost, for those of you who missed it earlier, you should always be using the sort by acquisition option in your inventory. Otherwise, this whole lesson is unusable, and honestly, sorting by type is just plain barbaric, entirely too uncivilized for me. Inventory management is not about making bad plays good, but about making good plays better. The most common reasons to make a proper inventory are as follows. You minimize the amount of button presses needed for any given read. You build muscle memory, making hard reads easier to do under pressure. You improve your overall reaction speed, minimizing time spent thinking and maximizing time acting. Finally, if you always follow the same inventory structure, you can easily switch between builds without needing to relearn your inventory or redevelop muscle memory. Now as for actually making the inventory, it couldn't be more simple. All you need to do is the first thing you need to know about proper inventory management is the concept of root weapons. If you have watched a Book of Matches hardswap video, you are likely familiar with the term. Our root weapons are the weapons we default to. These are our bread and butter, our go-tos. Every build has one, and it is important to recognize which it is before we build around it. Your root weapon should be able to cover a broad amount of potential situations. In DS3, the Claymore was a very common root weapon for this very reason. For example, it had hyper armor, it had good range, and it had good neutral play. In Elden Ring, with the new Ash of War system, almost any weapon can be a root weapon with the right Ash. However, there are still standout weapons that do particularly well as root weapons. My personal favorite being the Nakakiba. It has earned that spot for a variety of reasons. Chief among them is the range it has. Paired with the spinning slash Ash of War, you have a weapon that can effectively play both offense and defense in any given situation. This makes it an ideal root weapon and makes it easy to pair with weapons that can cover its few weaknesses or act as mix-ups for it. Now that we know about root weapons, let us build around it. I'm going to show you a total of 4 designs, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. First layout on the list is my favorite, what I like to call the cross. The cross works on a very basic principle, keeping things as close as possible. In the instance of Soothsayer Sewell here, the Nakakiba is the root weapon. There are 4 main swaps from the root of this cross. Left we have a Cold S-Stock. This swap is there to easily allow us to power stance on reaction. Right we have Banished Knight Halberd. This is the poise killer in Sewell's arsenal. Up we have Great Epée, the go-to chasedown tool of choice for Sewell. And finally, down we have Sewell's staff of choice, the Meteor Staff, which lets Sewell use Slicer and Glintstone Shard on reaction. The reason why these weapons are placed in these locations is because all 4 weapons can be used on reaction, and anything outside of 1 click's distance is substantially harder to do on reaction. The cross is not just these 4 weapons, however. Should we go 1 slot further in any of these directions, we have access to a new tool. In this instance, Quick Step and crit damage on up twice, chase down mix-ups after poise break on right twice, and parry on down twice. The most important lesson to take away from the cross is that we want to keep our most important tools within a one-click distance from our root weapons, as this lets us substantially speed up our plays, allowing us to act on the reads we make much faster than fumbling around for a solid second or two in our inventories would permit. Moving on to the second inventory on display, the inventory of Ashen Crow Mirror, which I like to refer to as the Mirror. Some of you might already be wondering what makes this inventory different from the cross that we just talked about. Well, the difference is simple. Where the cross focused on a root weapon in the center of the screen, the mirror focuses on power stancing first and foremost, with tools to help cover the weaknesses Mirror faces when using any given power stancing setup. As you can see, the left and right side of Mirror's inventory are the exact same, or you might say they are mirrored. This is to ensure that any given power stance setup within the inventory can be changed to within the smallest possible time frame. This is done by ensuring that the same amount of buttons is needed for both weapons, making it easy to build muscle memory for the swaps. However, it is not all, as mentioned, the cross is once again present, and no matter which side of the mirror you have your main weapon on, you can get to a unique tool within the span of 3 clicks. For example, if Mirror is power stancing straight swords, in 2 clicks she can have her hands on the Banished Knight Halberd to break poise, Great Epée for a chase down, or the Claymore for trades, all of which cover a fundamental weakness of the straight sword power stance moveset. The most important lesson to take away from the Mirror is that if you intend to use power stancing, you have to ensure that switching setups is quick to do, and the best way to ensure you always land on the weapon you are looking for is to mirror the amount of clicks needed to get to the matching weapon. This can be done on a large scale like the mirrored inventory, or a smaller scale as long as the amount of clicks stay the same. Arriving at the third inventory, we meet Raja of the Tomb, my full caster Bloodflame Dragon build, who will be showing us the inventory I like to call the Toolkit. So far, all I have shown you is physical inventories. This here is for the full casters that want a little backup handy. Where we previously saw symmetry and a focus on complementary tools for different setups, what we have here is a very simple spread of weapons. The main focus of this inventory is minimalism, and here's why it can be good for you. The keen-eyed among you may have noticed that we have both mirrored edges and a cross pattern present here. However, we are not seeing a lot of duplicated weapons or potential power stancing opportunities. The main features of the more minimalistic style that the toolkit offers is to access a parry tool no matter what weapon or casting tool you are wielding. And what some will find more important is that it lets you have a range of unique weapons within a close reach that fit a specific need of the build. As mentioned earlier, this is a full caster, and thus it seldom uses most of these weapons. However, when Raja does need a weapon, it is usually when she lacks the FP for range, chase down, or burst damage, all 3 of which are covered on every weapon in some way. A short list of examples in Raja's arsenal would be Great Epée, which has range and amazing chase down, Scavenger Swords have damage in abundance, Cross Naginata has range, damage, and good chase down, and finally the daggers have damage when you need to delete a spamming phantom with a parry. The main takeaway from the toolkit is that you don't need a lot of weapons to have a very effective inventory. You simply need to identify what your build's main setup could be lacking and add something to cover that. If you want to build good muscle memory quickly, a small setup like this is especially helpful, as you are able to get to any weapon in the inventory in less than 3 clicks away, no matter where you are. And when you are building an inventory of your own, keep in mind that sometimes less is more, and that sometimes limiting yourself can end up making your life a lot easier. And finally, we have reached the 4th inventory owned by Juna the Iron Wolf. She will be showing off the inventory that I like to call the Split. This setup is built around the premise of offense and defense. The 2 upper rows are focused entirely on offense, with every Ash of War chosen for aggression and chase down. However, when you have all offense, you also need all defense to balance things out. This is where the lower half of the build comes in. The upper row is focused entirely on chase downs. The second row focused on big burst damage with a bit of AoE thrown in for good measure. All of these burst weapons can also swap to a shield on reaction for parries, which can with a single R2 reach the crit daggers. The final line of weapons are focused on strong neutral play and big get off me Ashes of War. It is important to realize that with a setup like this, you need to be making your reads quickly. This is because your defensive weapons can't help you with their intended purpose if you don't make the read of needing one until you are already half dead. Same goes for aggressive chase down weapons, which lose a lot of their benefit if you're too slow at getting them out and ready. For this reason, an important part of this setup is ensuring that weapons that complement each other are aligned, much like how we did in the cross setup. For example, the Serpent Hunter has the same crouch poke as Ultra Greatswords, however it also has Great Spear running attacks, making it a great single target weapon. So, we pair it with the Large Club and the Troll's Roar, Ash of War, for a defensive AoE tool. You will want to make similar pairings in your own inventory to make the transition from all aggressive to all defensive easier. The main takeaway from this inventory layout is that you want to make sure that you design your inventory with both aggression and defense in mind. After all, as great as rapiers are, they won't do you much good when you're being chased by 3 halberds. While you don't need to go out of your way to split your inventory into 2, you can easily replicate the core concept in a typical inventory, like having a defensive option below your root weapon, so you always know where to swap when things get rough. Finally, it is time to put the knowledge you have just acquired to good use. The core concepts we need to keep in mind when you go out there to make your own inventory layouts is as follows. Make sure you have a core root weapon that you not only feel comfortable with, but can cover some of the basics your build needs. Preferably a somewhat defensive weapon that will let you gauge the situation and swap to an appropriate weapon as you make the reads. Keep your main swaps close by your root weapon. You want to try and minimize the amount of button presses needed to get to your given tool of choice. Any reaction weapon should be kept in a click's distance of your root weapon if possible. If you plan on power stancing, try to make sure that your weapons require the same amount of inputs to reach the desired weapon for both hands. Likewise, make sure to set them up with the same directional input for both. So for example, swap both weapons up once or down once, not up once and down once. Remember that just because you can add a lot of weapons does not mean you have to. Unlike in DS3, we don't need to add filler weapons that we don't intend to use just so we can put another weapon in a certain spot. So try to avoid cramming your inventory full of things you don't think you will use. Start small, and if a need arises that your inventory does not cover, expand and add onto it. Keep in mind that you will want both offensive and defensive tools in your arsenal. Try and keep a consistent pattern between inventories of where you place these tools. This will make it easier to quickly swap to either on the fly, as the situation demands, even under pressure, even across different builds. And finally, remember, it took people years to make good DS3 inventories. and they still ended up copying people. So, take it slow, you will get there in the end. If you see an inventory you like, don't be scared to take inspiration, but make it your own, experiment, and see what works for you and what does not. As long as you are trying, you're bound to improve. And that's about all from me. This entire project has been a long time coming, as some of you have known for a while. This is something I am quite passionate about. And a few people in particular inspired this video. Some for their lack of inventory management, others for their excellence in covering a similar subject in the past. I hope you all learned something, or if nothing else, enjoyed watching something you already knew plenty about. That being said, I want to quickly give a few short shoutouts to a few people that deserved credit for their help in making this video. I want to thank A Book of Matches for helping me conceptualize the initial pitch of this video, along with the inspiration for the core structure of this video. I want to thank Jello, Fel, and Eiroth for helping me proofread the script, and finally, I want to thank RofoTheGyrm and Prynne for helping me out with some of the footage in this video. I want to once again thank you all for watching. It has been wonderful as ever to be your host. Oh, and one last thing. Sort your fucking inventory, Rofo!